My friends and partners, Heather Duncan from Mountains and Plains and Brian Juneman from PNBA, have gotten together with Tin House to present this. So without further ado, Mr. Craig Poppins.
Hey, thank you everyone for being here. This is exciting to see such a great collaboration with PNBA, Mountains and Plains, and California, United California. So we appreciate you guys really hosting us as a small independent house. It means a lot to us to have your support here today. It's been a challenge for us, like it has for you guys, and for us to have this opportunity to share some of our new and forthcoming books. We really, really appreciate that. Before we get into everything, I just want to introduce some of the Tin House staff that is presenting today. We have Elizabeth DeMeo. Elizabeth, say hi.
Hi, y'all.
Elizabeth is in our editorial department. She oversees our poetry program while acquiring fiction and nonfiction. Masie Cochran. Masie is only on audio because she has a bottle of Everclear in her lap and a really wicked case of pink eye.
Oh my gosh, Craig. Hi, everybody.
Masie is our editorial director who has brought some amazing books to you guys over the years, like Bitter Orange, The Seas, which is a Pete Mulvihill backlist classic, Rabbit Cake, who is Vera Kelly, and many other outstanding works. But you will see her name and square. Her audio is coming through incredibly well. And then we also have our associate publisher, Nancy McCloskey, our 12-year veteran who hails from South Philadelphia and who is actually across the hall from me right now and enjoying an ecliptic beer like I am. Our Sunray Juicy IPA is our beer of choice today here at Tin House. And I believe we might have some of our sales reps lurking around in the background, Joe Murphy, Meg Sherman, Dan Christensen. We love our relationship with our Norton sales team, and we really appreciate you guys working with them so closely to bring our books into your store. At the same time, we have Yash in our publicity and marketing department. Yash is going to be throwing up some links to some of the books you're going to hear about today. And we also have a galley sign-up form. If you sign up on the galley form, you will automatically be enrolled in Amway and a Yankee Candle program as well, which is very exciting. But we can do home delivery on the galleys or to the store. So feel free to fill them out, not only for yourself, but for your staff as well. Before we kick things off, I want to let you guys know the beginning of June was my sort of first anniversary with Tin House, and it's been just an exciting ride. The staff here, top to bottom, our editorial team, our design team, our marketing publicity team, and our sales team with Norton has just been amazing to work with. And it's been sort of a banner year for us. We started off with our first New York Times bestseller, a book you might know as Mostly Dead Things with Kristen Arnett. And then we won a few awards. We won the National Book Critics Circle Award for Magical Negro, a Sand book, won the $100,000 Kingsley Tough Poetry Prize. About a month ago, we just won our first Edgar Award for the Hotel Neversink. And we've increased the list. Last year in 2019, we did 18 books. 2020, we're doing 25 books. And next year, we're doing 150 books. I haven't told the staff that, but they're all leaving now. So, but it's been a really exciting year, and we really appreciate everything you guys have done as booksellers to support us. So I thought if there's a better way to kick this off, and knowing how to throw a cocktail party, we invited Kristen Arnett here today. Her paperback came in April, and if you guys haven't seen the paperback, Nancy, do you have a copy of it? the package is absolutely outstanding. If you haven't seen it in the stores yet, we hope that you can turn this into like a hand-selling favorite all summer long. Jacob in our art department just did the most bang-up job designing this paperback. So want to welcome Kristen. Kristen, you're here on the West Coast. You're not in Florida.
Yeah, I know. It's very strange to be. I'm in Vegas, which I mean seems right for me because I'm from Orlando, right? So it's like Vegas. It's been really hot here at the desert. Today I'm drinking a breakfast stout because you can have beer anytime. But yeah, I wanted to say like thank you. Like this is like obviously like I mean I wrote the book, but this is like a group effort. Tin House did like just a rock star job putting together. Jacob with all of the art design, I cannot thank him enough. It's a beautiful book. All the new additions in the paperback are incredible. It's like, you know, tears to my eyes looking at it. And everybody at Norton too, like everybody just like worked their asses off to like make this book the thing that I just had only dreamed about it being. So I'm very lucky and like very, very grateful. Don't make me have a feeling. I'll have a beer. But yeah, it's wonderful. Thank you to everyone who has, you know, been part of making this book as successful as it was. And I'm hopeful that more people will want to read it. I'm definitely always up for doing any kind of like literary cocktail hour. You need like a person there. I'm your gal. They're here, yeah. Even from Vegas. I'm here in Vegas for like the next 2 months, but then trekking back across the country to Orlando. So we'll see what that looks like. But for now, super happy to do an online cocktail hour, whatever you need. But yeah, thank you so much. And thank you, Tin House, thank you. Like everybody asks me all the time, like, well, what was your experience with Tin House? And I was like, the fucking best. Like, honestly, it was like, just like everything I could have wanted to happen for this book was done and above and beyond. So the paperback looks great. I'm really proud of it, and I'm excited to have such a good team back now.
Cheers, Kristen.
Cheers.
Here's to mostly dead things. Well, thanks, Kristen, for joining us today. Masie and I are just going to introduce 2 books that have come out recently. As you guys, I know many of you I've heard are getting back in your stores, and you're probably uncovering books that you might not have seen over the last few weeks. 2 of them we're just really big fans of. They've come out in the last couple weeks. The Index of Self-Destructive Acts by Chris Beha. This is such an exceptional novel. It is a beast of a novel. This is sort of our big literary novel for summer. Chris is the head editor at Harper's Magazine. This is our sort of Let the Great World Spin meets The Emperor's Children meets a little bit of The Art of Fielding. It all takes place in that wonderful era called the Obama administration in New York City. Takes place within a single Met season, and you are pulled into this world where faith, finance, politics all intersect around this one family that's sort of crumbling down. And the title itself, The Index of Self-Destructive Acts, comes from the baseball statistician Bill James. The Index of Self-Destructive Acts are actually what the mistakes pitchers make, the wild pitches, the balks, the hit batsmen. And it's basically a lot of what these characters do to themselves over and over again, and the inheritance of these mistakes. I think with Father's Day coming up, this is a great, big, honking, wonderful book to throw yourself into all summer long. So came out about 3 weeks ago. The New York Times book review was absolutely outstanding for it. So I certainly encourage you to pick it up, take a look at it. Any of those big readers, Colin McCann came in with an amazing endorsement for it, Nell Zink, but we're very excited about this one. Masie, you have More Miracle?
Yes, I'd love to jump in and chat about More Miracle Than Bird. I love this book. It has everything I look for in a big book. It's complex, it's sweeping, it's an engrossing historical narrative. At the very center of this book is a beautiful and troubled and complicated relationship between a woman named Georgie Hydes Lee and a poet who needs no introduction, W.B. Yeats. And if you would even need anything more than that relationship, this book is just so full of magic, of the occult. World War I is the backdrop. There is communing with the dead. There is high society. There is, Ezra Pound and Dorothy Shakespeare. And I think it joins really great company of books that illuminate women in history that had sort of stood behind their more famous male counterparts. And it's so fun to read, but it's so smart. It really challenged me as a reader to sort of question authorship and who we celebrate and why we celebrate them. There was a scene that read like absolute revelation to me that was just shortly after Yeats and Georgie Hyde Lee were married, and she could tell that Yeats was distracted, namely sort of thinking and pining for a woman who he pined for all his life, named Maud Gunn. And in a stroke of genius, Georgie begins summoning a spirit from beyond the grave. And this sure does get Yeats's attention. And it results in 5,000 pages of automatic writing from Georgie, and many of the lines verbatim were in some of Yeats's most famous poems. And so it's smart, it's beautiful, lyrical. I really do think it's a debut novel that competes with The Paris Wife, The Guest Book, Loving Frank, The Nightingale. And it was just recently featured in the New York Times recommended summer reading. It's off to a really nice start. I got a note from Paula McLean after sending her, 4 or 5 books. And when she started reading it, she was absolutely wild about it. And now they're doing an event together in July. So I hope you guys can get readers on this perfect book club book. Just absolutely love it.
Yeah, and I think, you do go sort of down a wormhole when you start Googling the backdrop of this book. And I just remember reading a critic that said that Yeats would have been a mid-list poet at best had it not been for the influence of Georgie, her automatic writing, and her interest in the occult. So I just was absolutely enamored. And I remember coming back from Winter Institute, and Janice, who I see on the screen, I think she was a few rows up from me reading it. Then I went a few rows back and saw another bookseller just tearing through it. So I think it's one we just don't want to, even though it came out when it did, I hope you guys will have the opportunity to really get behind this and hand sell it. And the audience it's really clear who the audience is for this. So great book. And Masie, you're up next as well, right?
Are we ready to talk about Vera Kelly?
We are.
Oh my gosh. I wish you could see my face. There's a huge smile across it. I love Vera Kelly. I think she's real. Vera Kelly is Not a Mystery came out yesterday. And I have to say, the first Vera Kelly was a book-selling community success. Many of you that are in on this call were absolutely vital in launching Rosalie and Vera to the world. You rallied behind her, choosing Who is Vera Kelly as an Indie Next pick, a reading group guide. You guys highlighted as staff picks, and I definitely stole from your wonderful shelf talkers when pitching this book. There were beautiful comparisons to Le Carre, First, and Ambler, and many of you expressed joy at finally having a female-driven spy novel to recommend to customers and readers, and I couldn't agree more. And sort of in a very smart and wonderful turn in this second book, you now have a female-driven detective novel to recommend to people. And I have to say that, it was hard for me to wait for Vera Kelly to return. It was sort of like a long-lost friend, but she returns in force. The book is just so smart and so fun, jam-packed with twists and turns, and Rosalie has this uncanny ability to make a heroine at the center of the book that is once so incredibly cool and swoon-worthy. I mean, look at her on the cover of that book, but she's also totally accessible and relatable. I mean, Nancy McCluskey and I kind of think we could be like Vera Kelly. And I think Lauren Wilkerson puts it best when she says, quote, Vera Kelly is one of the most compelling and complex characters in modern fiction. And I just have one last thing to say because it was so good. The LA Review of Books wrote a novel of a review yesterday, and they're already asking for book 3. And they just said, the Cold War offers multiple options: Franco's Spain, Greek militia, military junta, McCarthyism, Guatemala, but most importantly, will Vera Kelly's new relationship with the bartender from the Bracken last? I hope we don't have to wait too long to find out. So maybe that's a way to ask Rosalie in on this call. And I want to just encourage all of you to make this a special pub week for Rosalie and Vera.
Hi, Rosalie.
Thank you.
Hi, Rosalie.
Hi, it has been a very special pub week. Thank you.
Congratulations.
Third one. None of the scenarios that she suggested are in it, but except for the bartender.
She's
And
still
that is,
with Maxine.
what's that?
Just tell us, is she still with Maxine?
She is. She
Okay.
is. And that actually was sort of my idea with doing a trilogy was not just that I wanted to sort of have some more, not just that I wanted to spend more time with the character, although I did, but also because I kind of had this idea that sort of the real emotional arc of the book is kind of not really noir at all. It's sort of like in the first book, she's sort of trying to figure out who she is, and she's pining after people who are inappropriate or unavailable. And in the second book, she kind of grows up a little bit and sort of recognizes how she can connect with other people. And then in the third book, this is about like actually being in that relationship and what that does to a person who's really more comfortable kind of on the move and on the run and not really being known very well by people. So that's what I'm
A lot of
on.
people probably don't know that Rosalie is a social worker and a counselor. So the psychological insight that she brings to Vera, it does not come from nowhere.
The irony here, and this is the last thing I'll say because actually I have to go do a session, but is that the LA Review of Books piece, which I loved and thought was really thoughtful, spends a lot of time on the idea that like this is not a psychological book, and there's sort of like an opacity there that is like that they were enjoying, which I thought was hilarious because I'm literally a therapist. That's sort of how it goes.
And Vera's drink of choice is a gimlet, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we had, and this just happened, but we've had a few blocks away from us, one of our neighbors that lives just down the street from Tin House is Amy Stewart, who is a huge fan, and Amy's been able to drop by for the last 2, but she had a conflict with another Zoom event with libraries. But Amy joined us yesterday, and she made a gimlet for Vera Kelly, but it was like with this limeade from Trader Joe's as well. And it was like the perfect summer drink and perfect Vera Kelly drink as well. So feel free, everybody, I encourage you to go to Trader Joe's, get the limeade and mix it with a gimlet. Look at Heather, already like, I'm on it. And
I do have to go, but thank you for
thank you, Rosalie.
Thank you all.
Happy Pub Week.
Thank you.
Happy Pub Week, Rosalie. Bye.
Bye.
And I should encourage everyone, if you want to chime in on any of the books or comments or ask questions, feel free to take yourself off mute, except Michael Barnard if he's in the house. All right. So I want to get over to poetry because we've been on a roll, as many of you know, with poetry in such a big way. We have run into sort of a stock situation on a couple of books, Morgan Parker's books, Magical Negro. There are things more beautiful than Beyonce. We are getting those back into stock as quickly as possible. But we noticed that there, and A Fortune for Your Disaster over the last couple of weeks, important voices at a time like this. So we are getting those back in stock, but I think you'll find our poetry program. Elizabeth's going to introduce you to a few of those titles right now.
Yeah, thank you, Craig. Yeah, like you said, we're just on a roll with our poetry, so I'm excited to talk about more of these. So first one, Baby First Birthday by Jenny Zhang. This is out now, so some of y'all may have it, may already be reading it. I love this cover. I'm going to say that for all the covers, but it's always true. So some of you may know Jenny from her breakout short story collection, Sour Heart, that came out a couple years back, was really successful. I hadn't read that, but I knew her from that collection. And the first time I encountered her work was when the manuscript for this poetry collection came on my desk. And I didn't know what to expect. I suspected it would be good, but just holy cow, it blew my mind. It's visceral, it's bodily, it pulls absolutely no punches. She's very fearless as a writer, also very playful and very cheeky, coy with her language, but also doing really, really serious work in interrogating patriarchy, whiteness, capitalism, often through the lens of motherhood and daughterhood and sort of being born, as this title implies. So there's a lot in here. Tommy Pico says it oozes with sexy, sexy death. That's the highest endorsement I can give this book. I agree, that's correct. And like I said, it's out now in lovely paperback with flats. Okay. And please, yeah, interrupt me and ask any questions if y'all have read or have thoughts about these too. So our next one, Anodyne. I love this cover as well. It's Romari Bearden piece. It comes out August 18th in paperback. And in addition to the cover, we were really able to get some wonderful blurbs for this book. Ilya Kaminsky, Mahogany L. Brown, Pragita Sharma, Alex Harmon, all of them, when I wrote for blurbs, were just like, oh my gosh, of course, we would love to read what Khadijah's doing. A lot of them are teaching her poems in the classroom. If you have somebody who's an educator, this is a great poetry collection to teach. It's very, the poetry itself is very personal. There's a lot about loss and grief, motherhood, her experience with her family members. But then there's also all these large sort of geologic forces running through these poems: mountains, volcanoes, caves, erosion. I think the opening poem is about apocalypse. And it's so interesting the way she sort of brings the world really big and shrinks it back down to this intimate experience. And I've never seen a collection do that before. I'm just sort of endlessly fascinated by this book. The closing poem, I think, is my current favorite. It's called I Slept When I Couldn't Move. It's longer, and I heard her read it recently on a Zoom call, similar to this one, and it was just so, so stunning. There was a really long silence after she finished reading. I went back and actually counted, and it was over 10 full seconds of silence. And then someone finally just said, speechless. And I think that was the only thing that could be said. Yeah, Kristen is chiming in the chats, as is Yash. I'm not making it up. This reading happened. It was incredible. And yeah, I mean, I want everyone to read that poem. I want everyone to read this book. Like I said, out on August 18th in paperback. Okay. All right, our next one, Resistencia. I love this art as well. This is by Irving Cano, who's a Mexican artist, and perfect to feature on this cover. It kind of fits with the poetry, which I'll talk about a little. Also, I don't know if you can see, but we have an incredible introduction by Julia Alvarez, which is just remarkable and touches upon so many themes in the book. Craig reached out to her for that introduction, and she signed on really quickly within a week, which I think just speaks to the strength of this collection and also the need for a collection like this one. You know, looking for comps, looking around, I've tried and we really could not find them, which I think is saying something. There are about 50 poems in this book, each one engaging with the idea of resistance in Latin America in some way. And they're printed, to show you, in their original language and then in English, so side by side, which is really nice, I think, and something you don't always see when things are poetry is published in English translation. And I think that kind of care just runs all the way through every step, every decision we've made while printing this. The poets in here represent every single Latin American country, which is fantastic. There's also a really wide range of languages. There's Spanish and Portuguese, which you might expect, but also languages like Mestizo, Mayan, Quechua. Really thoughtful care to the translation. There are big name translators and poets like Pablo Neruda, M.A. Cesar, Juan Felipe Herrera, but also a bunch of up and coming new folks. There's a huge range in here. So I think you'll have you know, readers maybe come to the book because some of those names, but then it'll kind of open them up to a whole world of new poets and translators. And also, you know, really maybe challenge views about what a resistance poem is and what it means. You know, these are poems about pain and fear and loss, but also philosophy, sensuality, beauty. There's a really strong feminist thread running through this book. So there's so much in here. It's really multifaceted. I think I speak for our whole staff when I just say it's a passion project. We are all so proud to be working on this book. I'm thrilled that I just get to go to work and this is what I get to do for a job. In paperback, it's coming out on September 15th.
Yeah, I think that the passion project is when we brought this on, we were like, this is too important. This is of the moment, beyond the moment. It is something that needs to be shared and reckoned with. And actually, when I reached out to Julia, it was for a blurb, and that was it. And she was like, I want to do more for this book. And the opening forward by her is absolutely outstanding. I really think that a book like this, you could actually build table displays around this as the centerpiece with other poets and poetry collections that add to this national and international conversation. So we hope you guys take a look at it. Definitely, we've got plenty of galleys on this one as well, but we're very excited. We just wish we could have it out now in this moment. It will, though, be tied to the publication date was tied to National Hispanic Heritage Month, which takes place in September. So just amazing voices from that. And speaking of amazing voices.
Yeah, he means Destiny, not me. I'm going to talk about her book next. Negotiations, another gorgeous cover. I think Kristen was talking about how talented Jacob, one of our designers, is, and he did this one too. I just love this. And this is another one where the enthusiasm we were met with and reaching out for blurbs was just fantastic. I think the poetry community is so excited for this one. We're already seeing tons of enthusiasm on social media and stuff like that. Elizabeth Acevedo says this is full of wonder. Donica Kelly says it is scalding and tender. I absolutely agree with both of those things. This is necessary and unflinching work. But what also struck me on first read was how much of an emotional range in here. Yes, the poems, they deal with hurt and pain and want and desire, but also strength, beauty, resolve. Really, it's all the ways we survive. And by the end, too, I came to understand I'd read a collection about identity, about how it is that we sort of become who we are in a really multifaceted way. And this one is coming out in paperback on October 13th. And I am not going to say any more because Destiny is here and she is going to read for us. And I'm so excited.
Ooh. Hi, everyone. I hope you're all doing well. I'm in need of some joy today. So I'm going to read the last poem in the collection. And it's called And Though the Odds Say Improbable. The Black ladies in their printed dresses float into the deli, tip-tipping across the coat of grease on the floor. It's still warm for October, so they remove their sunglasses, rub their oiled shoulders, remark, so cold in here. One watches purses while others shimmy to the salad bar. Some are nurses here for conferences, some on lunch breaks from government jobs downtown. Some are flakes. Unemployed, divas, deans, retired, do hair, edges slick, wand curls crisp in the freoned air. They pinch the fainted lettuce onto plates. They scoop the pitted olives, cherries, dates into bowls. The cotton blended florals, plaids, prisms, paisleys, polkas flutter on calves until they reach their seats. They kiss mustard, avocado, banana pudding, really just custard with mashed up banana, from three-ringed fingers. One sways to the soft serve machine and lingers a little too long, but returns with a smile, a swirl cone done up soda counter style. Every one of them been through something: sit-ins, bombings, busing, the crack epidemic, Reaganomics, backdoor abortions, miscarriages, picket signs in front of the free clinic, and now the white girl with the blunt haircut snatching plates too early. They tap her wrist, give each other the look, say, "It's all right, miss. Don't worry about us." My heart liked to stop when the Black ladies nodded their heads and hoops, clip-ons, drop pearls, chandeliers, gold nickel earrings twirled above beautiful elbows. Not a care in this old world. Republic been crumbled. Black Wall Street crashed about a century ago. They leave together. Their laughter is brash and openly secretive. You bet not ask. Perfume wafts. They wave, say, "All right, girl, I'll be seeing you." One coughs, and I pray it's just the cold air, the pollen, the pepper, a little piece of meat stuck in her throat. The Black ladies better have a blessed day, month, year, life, and I mean it the opposite way. They mean it whenever they have to say it to coworkers, husbands, customers, the demon board. Oop, child, I meant deacon. As I leave, I touch the table where they sat. They ain't superhuman, ain't always able to save the children, the men, the country, or even your silk presses, but whatever they touch, somebody's good God blesses. Thank you.
Shit.
Oh, wow.
Thank you, Destiny. Wow.
Oh, thank you for listening.
Thank you so much, Destiny. That was wonderful.
I love that one, Destiny. It's one of my favorites. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, it's one of my favorites too. Well, I feel like every poem is in here because it's my favorite.
She knows my favorite is, and Pete, you'll like this, 400-meter heat. I've said this at a couple. If you take the time to read 400-meter heat, I was just like, just blown away. So thank you, Destiny.
Thank you.
So we're going to move over to fiction. And Nancy's going to kick off some of the upcoming fiction that we have coming up.
Wow, I have to follow Destiny. This is Scorpion Fish by Natalie Bakopoulos. This is just an incredible book. It's like the perfect summer read. It takes place in Athens, and you can smell the sea in this book, and you can feel the sunshine. Mira's parents died unexpectedly, and she's living in the US, but she has to go back to Athens to kind of set up arrangements. And she's staying in her parents' apartment there. And the city so comes alive in this because it has all of the hustle and bustle of the city and the smell of the sea and everything that makes Athens so particular, but it also has all the creeping feeling of what this recession life is like there. So you get it in every encounter. And Mira is she is staying at her parents' apartment there, and she's trying to figure out her life. I mean, the coming of age stories, we usually think about as young people's stories, but when your parents die, everybody feels like an orphan, and she's shattered. And not just that, but her boyfriend, the longest relationship in her life, over 10 years, the person that she thought she'd be with forever, they broke up, and he's now remarried. Not only did he remarry, but he remarried a movie star, and he's living in Athens, and she sees him everywhere. So she's trying to come to terms with all of these changes, and she's hanging out on this balcony, and there's this guy in the balcony next to hers, and he's a sea captain who is on land for the first time in a really long time. And they just start sharing their stories, but right in between this partition, who they are, what they did for jobs, what they do for jobs, what their life is like, what their kids are like, what their families are like. And then they get into love, and everything gets more and more intimate. And if you're anything like me, you're going to start blushing because there's just this sexual intensity between these two that just gets thicker and thicker. And, in the early pages, like, I just want these two to be a couple. I just want this to work out. But this is real life. It's not a fairy tale. So we have to go through a lot in order for Mira to come to terms. Masie, the editor, said that this book reminded her of Eat, Pray, Love if it were a novel. And I thought that was so silly. I couldn't quite understand it. I got it when I read it. I totally understand, because you have the travel and you have the loving, you have this idea of coming into your own. And you can do that at 20, and you can do that at 30, and you could do that at 50. And I feel like that's what's really brilliant about this book.
And there's such a great crossover between literary and commercial. I mean,
exactly.
We had like Stacey D'Erasmo and Jesmyn Ward were the first two.
Jesmyn Ward says, "Scorpion fish dazzles, fierce and tender in turn, savor it, and it will leave you changed." Yeah, it's definitely not a book to miss, and especially with travel being on hiatus this summer, this is your travel book. This is the book of summer.
Yeah. And we have a publication date of?
Yes, it's in paperback. It's on sale July 7th.
Thanks. You're up as well.
All right, I'm going to tell you the book of Atlantis Black. I'm so wild about this book.
Nonfiction.
Yes, nonfiction. It's a memoir. It is punk rock true crime memoir. It is phenomenal. So we had this author at Winter Institute. If any of you were there, you may have gotten a chance to meet her. I put this galley in everybody's hand I could, and the next day they were kicking me because they stayed up all night long reading it. It's that kind of propulsive. Javier Ramirez said in one of these calls, he's like, if you can read the first page and put this book down, you should not be in this business. It's like that kind of story. So it opens in Tijuana, a motel room. A woman's body is found on the floor. She's died from an apparent heroin overdose. The ID in her purse says Atlantis Black. The Mexican police kind of casually mention that the body doesn't seem to match the ID. They do a cursory autopsy and cremate the body without ever making a positive ID. So this is her sister, Betsy, who's writing this book, trying to figure out what the hell happened to her sister. And she takes you into their childhood, and you get to understand the intimacy between these two sisters. This galley is incredible, and the finished book is too. It has all these photos of these kind of Irish twins in the book. But so Betsy was like kind of a bookworm, kind of a nerd. She wanted good grades. That's what she cared about. Atlantis was always a rock star. She was into drugs and sex and rock and roll really early, getting into trouble. And they kind of went their own way. Music was their thing. That's where that they could come back to. And it seemed like Atlantis's career was going to take off. She was opening for Regina Spektor. They were filming a music documentary about her. She had a big producer ready to produce CDs for her. And then everything just starts to unravel. And Betsy's telling you this. And the research is so intense because you have her voice coming through. You have her Facebook posts, you have her weird Craigslist ads, and it's just this devolving that happened. But still to this day, and Masie will agree with me, after finishing this book, I've read it 3 times. Masie, you probably read it a half a dozen times. We're still not sure if that was Atlantis in the hotel room or not.
No, it's 100% true. This book haunts me in a very specific way. I've never edited anything like it. I mean, combing through police reports and seeing video from a Rite Aid when there was a robbery, and looking at emails. Atlantis gave all of her emails in her will to her sister. So you really have her voice shine through. And I really don't know if Atlantis is still out there. I have no idea.
She's the kind of figure, she reminds me so much of the Angelina Jolie character in Girl Interrupted. She has that kind of fierceness, that kind of enigma, that kind of beauty.
You know, and there were some weird things that happened as we were like publishing this book. One, as I was reading it last summer in manuscript, Betsy, the author, was talking about her infatuation with her high school writing instructor, her English teacher. And it was Chris Castellani. And I was like, I texted Chris, I'm like, dude, is this true? He's like, it's all true. And then we found out once we produced the galleys, somebody in Norton, one of the marketing directors at Norton, thinking like, is she making this up? Said, I saw this galley. I used to be Atlantis Black's guitarist. And it was just like all this weird stuff. So yeah. I just think, you know, the reaction to the booksellers that read this at Winter Institute, I think we have something really unique, really special. It's the kind of book that you could hear NPR talking about, and there's just such a great literary quality, but it will send you down a questionable wormhole in a big way. So
it's coming out on August 4th as a hardcover.
Masie, I think you have Costa Alegre.
All right. Does somebody have a copy of it to hold up? Because this might be one of the most beautiful, one of the most beautiful paperbacks I've ever seen. Who doesn't want to know more about that girl and that horse? I know I do.
You have it up yet.
And, okay. Well, then that probably made very little sense. But once you see it, and I'll just let you know, this book has stayed with me since publication. It received amazing attention. I got a rave review from Mona Simpson in the New York Times. It was one of Glamour's best books of the decade, a best book of summer at AM New York, Moda Operandi, Goop, Publishers Weekly, Time, Southern Living, Thrillist. I could go on and on. It is just the perfect book club paperback. It is so full of questions of history, of legacy, of art and inheritance. And I think one of my favorite questions that I got from this is, what exactly makes a person rich? And I know I don't have a whole lot of time with this one, but I have to tell you what might be my absolute favorite post-publication stories of all time. The son of a famous painter, a man named Jack Hellion, reached out to Courtney Mom and told her he loved her book. But it wasn't just like a normal fan letter. It turned out this man, whose name was Lewis, it turned out his dad was that famous painter, and he had abandoned him and his mother after falling in love and marrying Pegeen Guggenheim, who is the narrator of this book, Costa Alegre, as a 15-year-old girl. And he told Courtney that reading her book helped him come to better understand and forgive this woman whose name was not allowed to be spoken at the dinner table. And then Courtney flew out and met him, and she stayed in this painter's cottage, and he introduced her to Pegeen's living children who are in their 70s. And it has just been this, you know, this book was stranger than fiction. It was so true in so many ways. And I just cannot wait for, you know, it comes out with all this great ancillary material in the paperback, comes out next month on July 14th. Really steer people for, you know, who love historical fiction, who love precocious young narrators and book clubs for this book. They will not be disappointed.
Awesome. Anybody questions? Pete, do you have any comments? So we've got just a couple of fall books to introduce, and we're going to kick it off with our lead fall title. Masie and Nancy are going to do a Donnie and Marie with our lead fall title, A Girl is a Body of Water by Jennifer McCumbee, coming out on September 1st.
Oh my gosh. Can I go first, Nancy? This one is a stunner. I mean, when this book came into my inbox, I sat up straight. I just knew, like, this is a book to reckon with. Jennifer is the winner of the Wyndham Campbell Prize, the winner of the Commonwealth Prize. The Economist had recently hailed her an international superstar. She is so ready to break out with this book. You know, it is a sweeping, epic Ugandan folktale, a coming-of-age story. And when I first started talking and got to know Jennifer a little bit, I asked her, you know, how did you think of this beautiful book? And she told me that it simply began as the story of a girl and her name Tarabo and the search for her mother. But then Jennifer realized, how do you tell the story of a girl without the story of the girl that came before her and the girl that came before that girl and that girl? So it became a story of aunts and sisters and mothers and grandmothers and great-grandmothers. And then she realized she was telling the story, she couldn't tell the story of these women without telling the story of the very first woman, the origin story, the things of folklore, the things of our beginnings. And Jennifer didn't like what she found. She found beginnings written only by men, hard beginnings for women, having nothing. So Jennifer rewrote and reconceived a myth in which an origin story for all women, where they come from the power of the water and they create life, and just as powerfully they can take that life away. They are majestic and beautiful as the oceans and the seas. And the result in this book, I promise you, is absolutely breathtaking. I mean, I told Craig that if I underlined every single line of Jennifer's book that profoundly changed and challenged me, that illuminated me, the first draft would have looked like it was printed on college roll notebook paper. I mean, I was in awe. And, I'm really glad that I'm not the one to comp this book for you guys, because after a pitch like that, you might not believe me. You might think I'm being hyperbolic, but Namwale Serpell did great justice in her endorsement. She said that Macomb has created a feminist coming-of-age classic for the ages, sure to join the company of Charlotte Bronte's Jane Eyre, Zora Neale Hurston's Their Eyes Were Watching God, and Elena Ferrante's Napolitan Quartet. And I really agree. And that was followed up with just a gift from Kirkus with a starred review calling the novel luminous, a magnificent blend of Ugandan folklore and more modern notions of feminism. And then the final line of that review simply said, "This book is a jewel." I know if I don't turn it over to Nancy, she's going to give me the eyes. So here you go, Nancy.
This book is a jewel. I love it like crazy. I felt so completely changed by it. And she did this phenomenal interview with Library Reads at BEA, the virtual BEA, where she went into kind of the folklore and the myth stuff in a way that kind of wanted me to start a feminist revolution. She was like, look at these origin stories of women. Look at, like, Judeo-Christians are founded on Eve. There's so much bad in that. Let's create our own. These were written by men. Let's create our own stories. And God, I mean, what happens to Karabo in this book, and I'll be really brief because I could go on and on and on, is she's a young girl and she's being raised by her grandparents and her many, many aunts and her cousins and this tiny village. And what happens to her at night is this second self comes out of her. She starts flying into the world and looks over her whole village. And she has no idea what's going on. And she has to sneak over to the village witch and say, "What is happening to me? Do you know what's happening?" And the witch was like, "Yes, you are the original woman. They've tried to breed it out of all of us, but there's something about you that's kept it going." And I mean, your heart is in your throat when this is happening. The language is beautiful. I promise if this does not get shortlisted for awards, I will eat my hat. It is that kind of book. It is big. We were the underbidder for this, but we got the book on just pure passion. And the agent and the author.
We didn't realize that, but we did. We fought for this. We're like, this is a defining book for us. And when we told Norton, we're like, we were the underbidder. We fought for this, but they, Jennifer really wanted to work with Tin House, and Norton was like, "Yeah, we know." And it was like, "Oops, sorry." Which was very exciting. But I think what was amazing is, like, I immediately got a text from Tiare Jones, and she was working with Oprah Magazine on their summer picks for, I guess, one of the upcoming, and she's like, "When is it coming out?" And she's like, I said September 1st, and she's like, "Dag," because they really wanted to feature that book in their summer issue. I don't know what's happening. We know that there's a lot of buzz around Oprah's office with covering this book, but it was just within the last four days, Lily King has chimed in, and then we heard today Marlon James is going to chime in as well. So this is a special book, guys, and we really would love for you to get your staff to pick up some of these galleys and really understand, like, we've got a big book and a big author on our hands, and a very timely and important book and author as well. So that's hard to follow up.
I know. It is,
Sorry
but
about
Masie can do it. She's doing Bright and Dangerous Objects.
Now I think I'm
All
next.
right. Oh yeah,
Oh.
Craig, you're doing Butcher's Blessing.
Okay.
You can do this one.
Yeah, sorry.
Craig, this is your book. You got this.
This is my jam, guys. And The Butcher's Blessing by Ruth Gilligan. And if anybody in California knows Mr. Frank Sanchez, who works at Green Apple, Frank is a man of very few words. And when this went out, this was the only one he was like, want that. And that's it. I'm like, dude, give me your address, give me something. This is like, you know, it was just want that. This is, I'm just pleasantly surprised. And at Winter Institute, and Pete, you might remember this, but there were a few of us at the hotel bar with Com McCann. And Com was just drinking the whiskeys, and he would not stop pitching this book to me. And I was like, Com, you know, we're publishing this. And he's like, but wait, this is what happens next. Like, and it was just, you know, it was so amazing to hear Com talking so enthusiastically about this novel. What I prepared for sales conference, I'll just read a little bit of this, but if you can imagine Cormac McCarthy and Tana French and Daniel Woodrell collaborating on a literary thriller, one that's set in the Irish borderlands in the late 90s, when the Cranberries were on the radio, when Ireland was moving past the trouble, and when the economy was starting to flourish. Now, in the backdrop, you have the tenuous pull of Ireland advancing itself into the future, while another part is still clinging to the tradition and the superstition and the myths that have defined the island for centuries. Of course, Cormac is going to want a grizzled body on the very first page. We got it with this one. Tana is going to want an ever-evolving cast of characters who don't see their blind spots. And Daniel Woodrell is going to want to make sure that the language echoes melodically with the Irish landscape and people. And all three of those authors would want revenge one way or another, which will happen on the very last page of this book. I describe it as sort of, one of my favorite Algonquin books was Elmet, which was shortlisted for the Booker Prize. I think of Emily Friedman's History of Wolves and Winter's Bone. This takes place in Ireland. It opens with a scene of a famous photograph that hadn't been seen for 20 some years that was taken in a slaughterhouse of a man hanging upside down by a meat hook, dead. And what you do is you're thrown back in to how did this photograph happen? And you're brought into this group of men, these 8 men who are butchers, and they follow this ritualistic tradition, traveling around the Irish countryside, performing cattle slaughters for the farmers in a very ritualistic way. At the same time, you have Ireland advancing itself forward, and it's all told through the eyes of several characters, mainly the young daughter, the daughter of one of these butchers, who is being pulled in different directions. I won't say what happens in this, but this is Irish Gothic to its core. And I will say that in the end, this young woman, and that photograph that takes place, she's holding a knife at the very end of this. There's going to be revenge, and it's outstanding. If you want it dark, this goes dark. And I'm just in love with what Ruth Gilligan has done here. And Com actually came through with an endorsement. He actually brought up Tana French. And I'm not saying it's not a procedural at all. This is on a different type of level. It's not like a big whodunit. But he brought up Taya Obrick as sort of in terms of the language and everything as well. So this is coming out, The Butcher's Blessing, in November 10th, mid-November. So now, Bright and Dangerous Objects.
All right. So Bright and Dangerous Objects. This is just the exact kind of book I want to read right now. I'm really gravitating to these types of stories. The premise is a woman's quest to become one of the first people to live on Mars. And I was just taken with it immediately. And quickly, you know, this premise it evolves and complicates when our protagonist, who is a deep sea diver named Solvig, she discovers she's pregnant. And I'm just endlessly captivated by the idea of a woman struggling to reconcile her dream, you know, in this case, traveling to Mars, with her desire to become a mother. You know, it just has such a realistic narrative, but it's tinged with sci-fi, sort of set in the near present. You can almost feel it, a future that, you know, this book imagines is one that we're so clearly moving closer and closer to every day. And it just feels so right for our current moment. You know, books and films like The Martian, Gravity, and Arrival, Story of Your Life, they really attest to a public hunger for stories like this one. And I think we're long overdue for more female-driven space narratives that are written by women. And, you know, Annalise is the perfect author to do just that. Her story is unique. Her dad worked for the European Space Agency in Germany, and his job it involved designing these satellites that would take pictures of the Earth from space. And he always had these ambitions to go there himself. And Annalise confided once that she used to wonder when she was younger if she had somehow stopped her dad from achieving this goal of becoming an astronaut. You know, that somehow having children was too much of a responsibility for him to live out, you know, that really lofty dream. And so that complication that she understood so thoroughly as a child lends itself so beautifully to this. It's about, you know, female ambition and compatibility with motherhood. It explores issues around women working in male-dominated environments. You know, here we have under the sea and deep sea drilling and in space. And it focuses on an area that is really underrepresented in literature. You know, that time in life where a woman decides whether or not to have a baby, and how a contemporary woman might best leave her mark on the world and build a legacy that might not be by having a child. You know, when I first acquired this book, I was like really scratching for comps. And then it turned out that's sort of exactly what I loved about it. There's not a whole lot of books like this. You know, if I was pressed, I'd say that this debut reminds me of one of my all-time favorite books, so I don't comp it lightly, in the department of speculation. And so, you know, this book, I think you can lend people who enjoy sci-fi, who enjoy women's issue stories. I think you can, anybody who likes a big book that has so much feeling in it, and it will pub in paperback on October 6th.
As a trade paperback original as well, right?
Yep. Yeah, that's right. And it's got a beautiful jacket. It evokes space and deep waters. It's going to have gold foil all over it. It's really stunning.
I just really quickly, because I know we're on long, but I love this book so much. Solvig, our narrator, I've never met anybody like her in life or in fiction before. She absolutely jumps off the page. I felt like I knew her. I felt like she was in my crowd of girlfriends. And, you know, when Masie or Elizabeth and I would talk about the decisions and the things that she's up against, I felt like I was talking about a friend. She's that kind of character. It's an extraordinary book. It's a great book club book because
I was left out of those conversations.
You were. I mean, because so much of it is about the choices that women have to make that they don't get talked about enough in life or in fiction, I feel. They're important, pressing questions.
They are, but I would also say, like, Craig, you know, you loved this book too. This is a book for guys too. You've got space. You have amazing scenes in the deep water drilling that are edge of your seat. I mean, she saves a guy whose line is cut, you know, his like cord is cut to the main ship, and they all have to depressurize. It's a book for everybody, but I agree with Nancy that particularly it's refreshing as a woman to read a book like this because it's unlike anything else in that way.
And we just have one more book to share with you. Nancy's going to read 5 chapters of this. Look at Valerie. I wish Valerie wasn't on mute.
Greg, I thought I got to pitch a backlist book for you.
Okay, we're going to let Pete pitch a backlist. This is called Backlist.
So ever since...
You are not reading 5 chapters unless you want to see me leave.
So this is The Hour by Bernard DeVoto, who's noted as a historian. it's got to come with a trigger warning. It's 50 years old, and the sexism and racism is off the hook. But it is a Tin House publication that was brought back by the recommendation of Daniel Handler, I believe.
Who wrote the intro for the new intro?
The copy on the front says, "A master of the intoxicating phrase, Bernard DeVoto writes of the cultural importance of hard liquor and the only hour, the cocktail hour." So I'll give you just one paragraph. "There are only two cocktails. One can be described straightforwardly. It is a slug of whiskey, and it is an honest drink. Those who hold by it at 6 p.m. offend no canon of our fellowship. Scotch, Irish, rye, bourbon at your will, but of itself alone. Whiskey and vermouth cannot meet as friends, and the Manhattan is an offense against piety. With dry vermouth, it is disreputable. With sweet vermouth, disgusting. To make a slug of whiskey, you pour some whiskey on ice." And then he goes off about being served some ice, green ice. If you serve your friend the drink and he wants fruit salad in it, remind him that cocktails are drunk, not eaten, but go along with him as far as a thin half slice of orange, or better, one of lemon peel. Deny him pineapple, cherries, or such truck as you would cyanide. If he asks for sugar, tell him you put it in to begin with, and thereafter be wary in your dealings with him. For sugar means that he is backsliding and will soon cross the frontier to join the heathen with bottles of grenadine and almond extract in his pack. But before you give a slug of whiskey to anyone, be sure that it is cold. Cocktails are cold."
That's awesome.
Yeah.
And it's just, Daniel wrote a great introduction for that. It's sort of, there's an impulsive quality to it, the way it's packaged and everything like that. You don't have the new edition with you, right?
No.
No.
I'll one up you. I discovered this book, guys, in Tin House's backlist, How to Do Nothing with Nobody, All Alone by Yourself. If there is a COVID book right now, this is it. And I think if you guys take a look at this, and this is sort of like a dangerous book for boys, dangerous book for girls. It was originally published in the 50s. And again, Lemony Snicket gave an endorsement for this. But this is one of these, like, as I was going through the backlist titles on the shelves, I was like, what is this? How to Do Nothing with Nobody, All Alone by Yourself. You have to be okay with parents giving their kids pen knives and stuff like that. But I think it's maybe about 50 different things that they can do on their own to occupy their time. So I would certainly check this one out as well for a backlist.
I'm ready to give my teenage boy a pen knife.
All right, so we're going to finish it up. And I have to say, Adrian from Warwick's is here, and just the whole cocktail thing. This is the first year Adrian and I have not been able to drink Blanton's or bourbon together for Book Expo. Basically, we were supposed to meet at the booth to talk about books, and she would show up with a flask of bourbon or Blanton's, and we would just drink that instead. So I really appreciate all of you guys being able to drink with us like this today and hear about our books. This means a lot. So, but Nancy's going to finish it off with
I was so afraid for cutting me off. I promise I'll be quick. This is my favorite book that Tin House has ever published. We originally published it in 2010. It's called A Got by Marlene van Niekerk. It's a translation from South Africa, from Afrikaans. And I love this book so much. So here's the story. 2010, we are a baby publisher, and everybody at Tin House is crazy about this. We had to convince the agent over and over again that we would do a good job with it. And we did. I wrote a letter to Toni Morrison saying, please read this book. It's honking. It's 600 pages long. I put a paperclip in an excerpt, like, just read this. Within a week, I get a personal letter back from Toni Morrison saying that this book is brilliant. It's absolutely mesmerizing. Next, Penn World Voices brings the author Marlene to New York to be on stage with Toni Morrison and Anthony Appiah to be interviewed. And then it goes on to get a 2-page review in the New York Times. Mary Gateskill writes this review in book form that I love so much that years later I would still read it. I have it practically memorized to this day. And it started this correspondence with Mary Gateskill. So it was easy to go back to her and say, would you write an intro? So she is. So for this new edition, it's an intro by Mary Gateskill. We have an excerpt of the conversation from Penn World Voices. We have book club questions. It's the 10th year anniversary. And okay, the Times Literary Supplement said the most important South African novel since J.M. Coetzee's Disgrace. That this is the company we're talking about. Very, very quickly, I will tell you about it. So Milla is a farm owner in South Africa, and she brings in this slave that's on the grounds. And this woman has been raped. She's battered. She's, 10 years old maybe. She brings her into the house. This is a no-no in apartheid South Africa to bring in a slave. And her husband's upset. The neighbors are upset. Everybody's upset. But Milla doesn't care. And she kind of treats her like a daughter. She teaches her needlepoint. She teaches her how to run the farm. This bond starts. But then Milla gets pregnant with a son, and everything sort of shifts. And at first you have everything from Milla's perspective. You have Milla's diaries, and you're sympathetic to her, this white woman who's being so good to this poor little slave girl. But then the shift happens, and you realize how unreliable Milla is. Actually, Mary Gateskill calls her a vampire. And that is when this turn, this psychological turn happens. So Milla gets ALS into the future. The son is grown, everybody's gone, and the only two people are left are Milla and Agat. Milla has ALS, and she's completely 100% dependent on Agat to take care of her. And she can't speak at all. All she can do is communicate with her eyes, but they know each other so well, all the bad and all the good. And it brings all this tension, all this racial tension to a head. One of the really interesting things about publishing this book was in 2010, The Help was huge. And this book, you should know, is the anti The Help. You know, this book is really being honest about racial tensions and hypocrisies and really taking people to task for it in such an acute, psychologically interesting way. I can't stop talking about it, so I will make myself, but I think this new edition is incredible. It's the 10-year anniversary, so if you can't see it, there's a face in this butterfly, and then on the back, there's a white face in the butterfly. I didn't notice it immediately, so that's why I'm pointing it out.
She's so excited
like,
about
are you blind? But it's a gorgeous, gorgeous book. I would put it in the hands of anybody who loves literary fiction. I love this book like crazy.
And Tony Perez, one of our longtime editors here, and Kristen Arnett's editor, both Nancy and Tony said this is hands down one of the most important books we ever published. And you know what I love about Tin House is having a passion book like this and going, we can do better. You know, let's bring this voice out again. Let's share it with the world. Let's put it out there and take another chance with this. That's how important the staff felt about this. And so when it comes out, it's early November or late November?
Oh, December 1st.
December 1st.